Let's call the meeting to order and stand for the pledge.
United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Honorable Mayor Ron Shaver,
Here.
Councilmember Dan Marlar,
Here.
Doug Shausa,
Here.
Allison Howe,
Here.
Clint Anderson,
Here.
Lisa Northrup,
Here.
Kevin Lindell.
Present. Okay, first item on our agenda is a reading of a proclamation declaring May 13th through the 19th as National Police Week in the city of Fort Morgan. To recognize National Police Week 2018 and to honor the service and sacrifice of those law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty while protecting our communities and safeguarding our democracy. Whereas, it is important that all citizens know and understand the problems, duties, and responsibilities of their police department, and that members of our police department recognize their duty to serve the people by safeguarding life and property, by protecting them against violence and disorder, and by protecting the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression or intimidation. And whereas the Police Department of Fort Morgan has grown to be a modern and scientific law enforcement agency which increasingly provides a vital public service. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Ron Shaver, call upon all citizens of the city of Fort Morgan and upon all patriotic, civil, and educational organizations to observe the week of May 13th through the 19th as Police Week, with appropriate ceremonies in which all of our people may join in the commemorating police officers past and present, who, by their faithful and loyal devotion to their responsibilities, have rendered a dedicated service to their communities and preserving the rights and securities of all citizens. I further call upon all citizens of Fort Morgan to observe May 15, 2018 as National Peace Officer Memorial Day to honor those peace officers who, through their courageous deeds, have lost their lives or have become disabled in the performance of the duty. Flags of the United States will be flown at half-staff on all government buildings on May 15th. Therefore, be it resolved that by the virtue and the authority vested in me as mayor of the city of Fort Morgan, I formally declare May 13th through the 19th, 2018, as National Police Week in the city of Fort Morgan, and publicly salute the service of our law enforcement officers in our community and in the communities across the nation. In witness hereof, I hereunto set my hand and cause the seal of the city of Fort Morgan to be affixed this the 15th day of May, 2018. Lauren? Thank you.
Care? Okay.
That's protocol, I guess. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank your guys for the service that they provide our community. Nelson. Next is a reading of a proclamation declaring May 20th through the 26th as National Public Works Week in the city of Fort Morgan. Whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, and services that are vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and to the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of Colorado, and whereas these infrastructures, facilities, and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of our public works professionals, who are engineers, managers, and employees from state and local governments and the private sector, who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our nation's transportation, water supply, water treatment, and solid waste systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential to our citizens. And whereas it is in the public interest for citizens, civic leaders, and children in the city of Fort Morgan to gain knowledge of and maintain a progressive interest and understanding of the importance of public works and public works programs in their respective communities. And whereas the American Public Works Association has celebrated the annual National Public Works Week since 1960. Now therefore be it resolved, Mayor Ron Shaver, do hereby designate the week of May 20th through the 26th, 2018, as National Public Works Week. I urge all people to join with respective representatives of the American Public Works Association and government agencies in activities, events, and ceremonies designed to pay tribute to the public works professionals, engineers, managers, and employees, and to recognize the substantial contribution they make to protecting our national health, safety, and quality of life. In witness hereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the city of Fort Morgan to be affixed this, the 15th day of May, 2018. Steve?
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Good job.
Kudos to your guys for what they do. Next is presentation and possible action on a proposal to collaborate with community partners on the purchase and installation of a new custom sound systems for the Dalms Talton bandshell.
Mr.
Hammer.
Mayor, Council, thank you. To bring you up to speed, hopefully I explained it in the memo okay, but a month or so ago, Jeff had asked me to reach out to Mary Zorn, and then also had a visit from Chuck Morgan. They explained to me that they had been working for a few years trying to create a sound system for the bandshell. The bandshell committee had a pretty big chunk of money that they wanted to spend towards this project and get that whole account closed, basically. We had a original estimate from Kinnan Entertainment from 2016. So we called Michael Blecka, I think is how you pronounce his name. He met us at the bandshell. We went over things one more time, talked about concerns and what we were looking for. He came up with some more estimates, actually 4 different estimates. One that was kind of the core equipment, speakers, amplifiers, that kind of thing. Another one that was additional equipment, and then an installation cost. He also had a 4th estimate I don't believe I included in your packet. That was materials and equipment we may want in the future to be able to rent out. So anyways, it ended up being a lot more than the bandshell had. We brought in the car show folks. We asked them if they would participate in this project. They've agreed to do so. And so what I'm here tonight is hopefully to get approval to go ahead and spend up to $9,000 to help with the installation of this sound system. It wasn't really budgeted for. We'll use the parks, general maintenance parks budget to pay for it this year. We may end up over in that budget line item, but that's basically it. The good news is if we can move forward, we can start right away, hopefully have this thing done by the Glenn Miller Festival and ready for their programming, which starts the 7th of June. It'll be a system that bands can use when they're here. The car show will be able to plug into it, do their announcements. It'll also tie into the downtown sound. So if the car show wants to, I don't know, do their award ceremony and broadcast it up and down Main Street, it'll all be tied together. So it sounds like pretty good system, and it sounds like Michael really knows his stuff. And I think it'll be there. It'll be everything we want now and able to grow into the future.
I think he did the fairgrounds and
He just
that as
completed the
well.
county fairgrounds, which
Yeah.
was a much bigger project than this.
Well, I know the speaker system that's down there has been on the plate for quite a while. It's something that we do need. So with the band shell account, what was left in that, and the Fall Harvest Car Show having a substantial donation to put towards it as well. I know that the band shell itself has been a community project, and so it's nice to see that we are working collaboratively with the others, and I think it's something that benefits the entire community from my perspective. So, anybody else have any questions or comments? Jeff?
I'd only point out, I think Ty for really pulling these groups together as another example of how we can work together within our community with other organizations to make things happen. You know, the city's only covering, it's covering less than half of this costs, and it's really going to benefit everybody in the community. So I want to thank Ty for working with these groups and getting this done as quickly as he did, because I know that this has been something we've been trying to figure out the best way to do it, and Ty just went and got it done. So I want to thank him for his efforts to make that happen.
So that was one of my thoughts as well as I read through the packet. Good job on that. It's spectacular that we have something as nice as the band shell in the community. And we have community members that have put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into it over the years, and so this will be a nice upgrade. I am curious about protecting it into the future. I'm wondering, will this be external stuff? Will it be put up? and
There'll
taken
be
down?
two big two-way speakers that will be mounted way up high on those two main columns. They're completely waterproof, weatherproof, whole kit and caboodle. Everything else will be in the back room. There will be two subwoofers, but they will actually wheel out when we need them and plug in and then go back into the room. The downtown sound board, and Nelson's helping me figure out how we're going to stream music for the regular downtown sound, but it'll all be in the back room now also. And Michael thinks he'll be able to make it. So it literally is just taking a cable from the permanent system into the downtown system, and then a group will be able to broadcast throughout the entire speaker system, is what we're hoping.
Okay, sounds cool.
Super impressed with the time frame too. I think
Well,
that's-
we're pushing it. You know, their busy season is just a few weeks away with concerts, and it's impressive. The guy that he brought down last week, we met to look at all the conduit and see how we're going to pull everything. The guy that he brought down to look at it actually had just finished setting up the Pink concert at the Pepsi Center. He was up till 3 a.m. that night working on her concert and then came down here. So I think he's got
Knows what he's
the right
doing.
crew and knows what he's doing.
She's probably a little more demanding than we are.
I think so. I think he said she had 30 semi-trucks full of stuff.
Wow.
Ours is a drop in the bucket then.
Yeah.
So, I would entertain a resolution.
Your Honor, I would offer a resolution accepting the expenditure of up to $9,000 towards installation costs for additions to the band shell.
Second.
Have a resolution by Lisa Northrup, a second by Dan Marlar. Vote by roll call.
That resolution carries unanimously.
Thanks, Ty.
Thanks.
Next is possible action authorizing the mayor pro tem to sign a letter endorsing the candidacy for myself to run for the CML Executive Board. I have, and if she doesn't want to, John is able to do it.
Hey,
Just saying.
wow.
Yeah, well, one of the things I just point out, if you don't mind, Your Honor, is that the City of Fort Morgan has a long history with CML from its founding all the way up through. We've had several people participate on the board, and I think at one point, a couple times, we've had a president from our community for that board. So we have a long history in the success of that organization, and one of the things I think that Mayor Shaver brings to that role that a lot of people who are on that board don't have is his years of experience working for a municipality and then his years of experience being on council and as a mayor, and I think it'd be very beneficial to all of the communities in the state of Colorado to have somebody like that on the board. So I know you're laughing, and
We're just giving them.
it might be kind of funny, I don't know, but I think you do a really good job, and we're hoping that council can get behind him, we can get him on the board to make some things happen for everybody.
What is the,
Oh, go ahead.
what does the time commitment look like for the mayor if he's elected to the executive?
There are board meetings a couple times a year. They have one at CML. We're already there. They have one around the time they have the policy committee meet to set what's the position going to be on various bills. But a lot of it revolves around what's happening with the state legislature. But they have regular, and then I think they have a retreat that they do.
Yeah, and then they want you to attend some of the district meetings for various districts. One would definitely be part of it.
Well, that sounds exciting for you, Ron.
And I joke, but I think you are the perfect candidate for this position. I think your passion for municipal government, your commitment to CML over the years speaks volumes about your experience and your ability to do your job, and it would be my honor to sign the letter.
Thank you.
So you can't do it, John.
I would entertain a motion.
Your Honor, I make a motion to authorize Lisa Northrup, our mayor pro tem, to sign a letter endorsing her candidacy for the executive board at CML.
Second.
I have a motion by Allison Howe, a second by Dan Marlar. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Wow. Thank you for confidence.
Clear my throat.
Somebody's going to get in trouble.
Next on the agenda, and I sincerely thank you. Next
Good luck.
on our agenda is a 2019 budget calendar. Mr. Wells and Ms. Kinney.
Well, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Kinney this year to kind of go through the revenue. But one of the things that I'd point out is that we have consistently taken a very conservative approach. And in projecting our revenues, we're getting really ready to kick off and start presenting expenditures, but revenues is the front end. And our philosophy for budgeting is a lot different than a lot of government entities. We budget for what we need and we spend what we need. We don't budget for what we want and spend what we want. And often that results in coming in above revenues if you look at the prior year histories. And then, our managers do a really good job. They only spend what they need, and there's a lot of times that they roll money back into the reserves. And where that's put us is in a position where we have money in the reserves to help with projects moving forward. So I'll turn it over to Jeannie. She's got a great presentation with pictures tonight. I'm excited, and
I can't wait.
if you have any questions, stop us.
Good evening, Mayor and Consul. We have this billboard up here to get you all to anticipate the revenue budget, like you do on the road, McDonald's, sort of like that. Sort of not, but it's going to be fun going over these revenues. It'll be a good time. And it won't be as fun as riding the fire truck was. That was really
Finance is fun, though.
Yeah, but this will still be good. Okay. So I don't even know if I need that. But anyway, the first slide tells you how revenue. Here, let me just use my one that's in here, so the public can hear. Otherwise, John will yell at me. Okay. So first, I just tell you how we go about doing the revenue projection. And Jeff and I get together and project the revenues each year. This is just a very first run at it. We change it later. When we find out about expenses, we will change the revenues for the utilities, that sort of thing. So it's based on what has happened in the past and what we think might happen in the future. A lot of times the past is the best predictor, so we use that. We talk to department managers when we need to. We contacted a couple of them for the general fund this time. We normally will contact the enterprise fund managers for help in determining whether they think there's going to need to be a rate case. We also talk to rate analysts, so we know to increase or decrease sometimes what the revenues are going to be for that year. The transfers in what that really is reserve. And so transfers in usually aren't added until we get towards the end of our budget and we say, well, the only way this is going to work is if we decide to use reserves. And so we actually place reserves into the budget. So it's important when you look at your revenues, and I don't think you guys probably have a printed copy, but you have one online. The important thing first to do is to, whenever you look at numbers, you look at the total at the bottom and say, hey, what happened overall? And you can see that the budgets that Jeff and I projected are like 9 million, what's the number? 11 million, no, 9 million less than they were for this year's budget. But it's also very important to know that you should be comparing to actuals. The budget that we have for this year has in reserves that we're intending to take. The budget for next year, for 2019, doesn't have those reserves in there yet. And so that makes a vastly different amount if we're using reserves to pay maybe for water debt or maybe for some capital improvement item, maybe for a fiber network, something like that. We would be adding in reserves in order to pay that, to show that that was going to come from the cash that we already had. But in this first budget that we do, we don't put that in there. So that's why the numbers look so different on the bottom, because those transfers, and then a lot of times in the past, those transfers, we haven't really had to use reserves. We've projected needing reserves, but then at the end of the year, it's turned out that because that department didn't end up operating at a negative, we didn't have to take money from our cash. It all came from the revenue that came in. So then, looking at the next slide, which is almost as exciting and beautiful as that one. No, that's the one. I skipped one. Anyway, the one that I skipped, it's not really going to matter. I'm just talking about, we're looking next at the distribution of revenues. If you look at the distribution of revenues among funds, it makes it more interesting to you because you can decide what do you really need to look at. In this one, which one would you say you probably don't want to worry too much about the amount that the revenues are? Well, you might say sanitation, but because that's an enterprise fund, it still is really important, even though it's just a real small part of the pie. We have to have enough revenue come in to cover the expenses. And the last 2 years, we've increased the sanitation rates, a very small amount, but we've increased them so that the expenses and the projection of capital that we're going to need will be there. So in this slide, I guess it's interesting to me that it shows that the electric, of all of our funds that we have in the city, the electric fund is the one that has the most revenue that comes in. But keep in mind, it's also spends the most. So, we have 2 years ago, we actually had a very small loss in the electric department. So it's revenues for enterprise funds are based on what we set for rates, and we set it based on what we really need. Okay, then the next one, the general fund revenues, if you take just those general fund revenues that were in that little part of the pie from the previous slide, and you look at the general fund revenues, you can see that the largest by far of that category is what?
Taxes.
Right, taxes. Taxes is the highest amount. And we'll have another slide that will show what sorts of taxes are the highest ones that come in for the general fund. But it also shows intergovernmental revenue. And one thing to keep in mind with intergovernmental revenue, that's us paying ourselves for the most part. Most of it is those in lieu of taxes that the other parts of the city, the enterprise funds, pay because they aren't taxed. For other reasons, they pay the city for the opportunity to operate as a essentially not-for-profit, which otherwise they would have to pay. So that is paid and helps support our general fund. So those are the two main ones in there. And then we look at the next slide, and it's the general fund tax revenue breakdown, and that's the one I was telling you. Out of those taxes, if you look at what is it split out, what's the main one we get the money from, or we project that we will next year, and we pretty much always have?
Sales tax.
Right, sales tax. So sales tax is the big one. Property tax is pretty big. The other ones are really small tax items, but they're still definitely a part of what we use in order to operate our city, and particularly our general fund. So the sales tax is higher now because it's the third again as much as it was before because of the
Strictly for streets.
Strictly for street. Okay, then the intergovernmental funds, that's just to tell you what I already told you. The intergovernmental funds, the largest part of that is in lieu taxes, and in lieu taxes are paid by gas, electric, sanitation, and now sewer. We didn't used to have sewer paid because we kind of went by the fact that they had debt, so they shouldn't have to also pay this. Water isn't paying now. So those funds together make up that in lieu of tax item that pretty much makes up the intergovernmental taxes that we get.
And the road and bridge comes from the county?
Pardon me?
And the road and bridge portion
Yes, it
comes from the
does.
county?
It comes from the county. And then I went on to capital improvement fund because it's bigger. You guys aren't having as much fun as I thought you was going to have.
I'm having
Road
fun.
and bridge is fun.
Sorry.
I'm engaged.
Well, you know, one
This is what I do.
One point that's really important is, you know, sometimes people complain about how high their electric bills are. And our electric bill every month runs about a $1.2 million. So when you think about big electric bills, we were talking about spending a lot of money in the electric fund. We have big electric bills every month. We have to, you know, run the street lights and we
Yeah,
have
the
to-
city pays it.
And we
Right.
buy the wholesale for everybody else. But yeah, we have a big bill there. I guess that's not really funny, is it?
Yeah, that wasn't fun.
But it should make everybody else
Bills,
feel good
not
out there.
fun. Revenue fun. Okay. Then looking at the capital improvement fund revenue distribution, I put that on there because capital improvement fund is one of our larger funds. It's kind of nice to know where the money's coming from, and it's primarily coming from taxes. And in fact, the only reason that intergovernmental is so big is because Steve wanted me to put in $1 million in case we get that grant. So it's in there, and it may have to go away depending upon whether we get it or not. But it's in there now. Okay. So then this slide, it's just explaining again that the enterprise funds revenues are based on the rates that come in. They're budgeted based on what their expenses are. And when you look at enterprise funds, I don't have pie charts for them because where do you suppose all the money or most of the money comes from, like for electric?
Ratepayer.
Right, the ratepayers, so the charges for services. So the miscellaneous is such a tiny little slit. They would all be these huge circles with just a tiny little other for miscellaneous revenues and those sorts of things. So that's why they're going to cover themselves provided we are astute with our rate making, which we haven't always been, but we are now.
Because that's important for people to understand that, you know, we're not in the business of making profit off of the enterprise funds from a rate perspective. So
No.
I think sometimes there's a misnomer out there that the rates that you're paying are going into this big pot that we get to spend, and that's not the case. It's pretty much a wash.
Yeah,
So.
that's exactly right.
That's why we do a rate analysis every year
Yep.
for gas and electric.
Yep.
And we're doing water and sewer this year, so, in fact, very soon.
So I want to thank Jeannie for putting this together. A couple of highlights or important things to note, I think, for public and for council is that there are some revenues that are restricted, meaning that we can only spend them on specific things, and I wanted to kind of go over those. Strictly for Streets is a restricted revenue source, meaning that we can only spend it on streets. So it will be segregated out for the auditors to watch where the revenue comes in and where it's spent. Another restricted revenue is in the capital improvement fund for the general fund. It is restricted to just capital purchases. If we take any of that revenue and try and spend it somewhere else, it's a violation of the city's laws, and our auditors will put it in their audit report that we haven't used the citizens' money the way that we were supposed to. The Perpetual Care Fund is a trust fund for the cemetery, and the revenue from that can only be used in the cemetery. So that's another restricted revenue source that we have that cannot be spent on anything else. And then we have self-insurance funds for the health insurance portion is considered a trust fund that has to be set up for the benefit of the employees in order to be self-insured. Again, the revenues from that are restricted, go into that trust fund and stay there. And one of the other ones is the Conservation Trust Fund. That's the money we get directly from the lottery proceeds to our community. We get about $100,000 a year, give or take, and that can only be spent on outdoor or some sort of recreational expenditure. Usually we buy really expensive lawnmowers with that, but we've built bridges and we've done other things. So sometimes I think.
At the park, bridges at the park.
Bridges at the park, yes, bridges at the park. Road and Bridge pays for those other ones, kind of. So the point is, I think sometimes we look at the budget and we say, well, look at all this money. Well, the money that we receive, some of it's restricted. Grant funds that we receive are restricted specifically for projects for which the grants were provided. And so when you look at the revenues, they look very large because they are, but a lot of those revenues are restricted for specific purposes and we can't just spend them on whatever we want. Another restricted concept is between the enterprises. As Jeannie pointed out, we don't take all the money out of the electric fund and move it into the general fund and build whatever we want or do whatever we want. That money has to be spent on the electric fund assets and purposes. So a lot of this revenue that comes in has restrictive requirements on what we can and can't spend it on. And then with Tabor, there's also restrictions between enterprises and the general fund or taxing funds that we have to be aware of. So I know it's fun to sit down and look at the money coming in, but there's a lot of rules that we have to look at and follow. And I don't know if the public's completely aware of that when we sit down and put these revenues together, that we have to match up expenses directly to what those restricted uses are. And so for council, when we get in and start reviewing the budget and expenses, sometimes say, well, it looks like we've got a lot of revenue over here. Why can't we just take it and spend it over here? Well, there's a lot of restrictions, legal restrictions that we have to follow and that Jeannie follows with everything that we do in her department to make sure that we aren't getting outside of the restrictions.
Yeah, and just also to add on the enterprise funds, the only way the enterprise funds buys capital is with their own money. We can't, the capital improvement fund buys all the things for the general fund, but electric, if they're going to, it has to come out of the revenue. So it's not just for the operating expenses, it's also for the capital that we have to set rates. And when they set rates, they look at what capital is going to be purchased so that we'll have what we need built up in the cash, so that we'll have it. So, and the other thing we were talking about mentioning was on sales tax so far. This year, year-to-date, sales tax is 34% higher than it was for last year. That's through the month of March because everything is 2 months behind. Also, the receipt of the money is 2 months behind. But a 34% increase is perfect because it means that we're probably collecting the same amount plus the extra 33% that we were anticipating. So sometimes we really don't know for sure whether things went down or up, but it looks like we just have steady to last year as far as what sales tax is. So, cool. So like I said, it was totally fun, right?
Totally.
Totally.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeannie, for a job well done.
So we'll use these revenues as the projections that we try and balance with our expenditures as we go through the budget. And if there are any questions or any objections at any point when we're going through the process, just let us know. We want to make sure that there are no surprises when we get to October.
Smooth sailing. Next is consent agenda. Mr. Brennan.
Thank you, Your Honor. Tonight's consent agenda includes item A, approval of the disbursements and payroll for April, and item B, approval of the minutes of the May 1st, 2018 City Council special meeting, regular meeting, I'm sorry. All matters listed under item 8, consent agenda, are considered routine business by the council and will be enacted with a single motion and a single vote by roll call. There will be no separate discussion of these items. If discussion is deemed necessary, that item should be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately.
Anybody have any questions? Seeing none?
They look good.
I would entertain a resolution accepting the consent agenda as presented.
So moved?
Second.
Have a resolution by Lisa Northrup and a second by Allison Howe. Vote by roll call.
That resolution carries unanimously.
Next is public comment or audience participation for anything not on the agenda. Seeing none, reports by officials and staff.
Thank you, Your Honor. As you've noticed, there's a lot of construction going on around the city, and you'll hear some complaints and some grumbles, but we plan on having things wrapped up by the end of July with regard to most of the street work. We're doing the utility work first, and I know that's frustrating to some people that we're not patching it right away, but we're doing that for a reason. Obviously, we're putting in the pipe that needs to be replaced, so we're not coming back and digging up the street, and it would be a huge waste of money to patch it for a week or two before they come in and fix the street. So we appreciate everybody's patience with the dust and the mud and everything else that goes along with the detours, but our contractors are doing an excellent job, and really appreciate what's going on. It's going to look great in a little while. You don't realize how much you use a road until we close it. And you're like, man, why is that road closed all the time? We've got a lot of things coming up. We're going to be really busy for staff, not just the construction season, but we're having special events during the summer coming up. We'll have Party in the Park. We'll have some more information on that. That'll be up here in less than a month, and Ty's got some good ideas for that, and we've been talking about some other opportunities for the National Night Out for the police department this fall at the end of the concert series, and that ought to be great as well. So a lot of fun things coming and a lot of people busy to get things done. Did anybody else have any other announcements? Or Lauren, thanks for being here tonight. Appreciate it. Any questions from council or things that we can do for you? No, sir. All right, that's it.
Bids, meetings, and announcements. Mr. Brennan.
Thank you, Your Honor. There's a couple of bids open right now. The city's accepting sealed bids for a police vehicle until 3 p.m. on May 31st, and soliciting rates for 2018-19 snow and weed removal services until 3 p.m. on Thursday, July 12th. Under meetings, the Library Advisory Board is scheduled to meet Monday, the 21st at 4:30 p.m. in the Museum Community Room. The Heritage Foundation will meet the 24th at 4 p.m. in the Community Room. On May 28th, all city offices will be closed for the Memorial Day holiday. And Tuesday, May 29th at 6 p.m., the city will host a public forum on the charter change proposal here at City Hall. The next City Council regular meeting will be June 5th, and that will be the final tour. We'll be meeting here at City Hall and then going to the parks, cemetery, airport, and golf course. And the meeting itself will be held at the golf course.
And dinner will be provided. That we will have hamburgers and some other fine grilled meats. And Ty's going to get the grill all ready to go. So, you know, come out and your appetite to learn and your appetite to eat. So, thanks, Ty. Appreciate it. Go to that's plan B, backup plan.
Burgers are good out there. Next is an executive session for discussions on a personnel matter under CRS Section 24-6-402, 4F, not involving any specific employees who have requested discussion of a matter in open session, any members of this body or elected official, the appointment of any person to fill an office of this body or of an elected official, or personnel policy that do not require the discussion of matters of personnel to particular employees. And the following additional details are provided for identification purposes. The city attorney's employment contract. I would entertain a motion to retire to executive session.
So moved.
Second. I have a motion by Lisa Northrup, a second by Kevin Lindell. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We will adjourn to executive session.